What if the chaos destroying your peace right now could be silenced in just 5 deliberate steps? For months, maybe years, you've been drowning in noise, external opinions, endless distractions, the relentless demands of a world that profits from your exhaustion. You've lost touch with the core of who you are. Your mind feels scattered. Your purpose feels distant. Today, you'll discover 5 Stoic rules that will reset your mental architecture, restart your momentum, and refocus your life with the precision of a sharpened blade. These aren't gentle suggestions. They're ancient commands that have forged unbreakable men and women for over 2,000 years. Watch till the end. The rule you skip might be the one that breaks your chains. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor of Rome, ruled the most powerful civilization on earth while barbarians hammered at his borders. Yet, in the midst of war, plague, and betrayal, he wrote in Meditations, Book 4, verse 3, "People seek retreats for themselves in the country, by the sea, or in the mountains. You are very much in the habit of yearning for those same things, but this is entirely the trait of a base person, when you can, at any moment, find such a retreat within yourself." He discovered what most never will, that true power isn't found in escape, but in the fortress you build in silence, within your own mind. Right now, in this exact moment, you live in the most distracted era in human history. Your attention is fractured into 1,000 pieces. Social media algorithms feed you outrage. News cycles manufacture anxiety. People who don't know your name have opinions about your life. You're exhausted not from doing too much, but from being mentally everywhere and present nowhere. The Stoics understood something fundamental. Before you can conquer external challenges, you must master the internal chaos. Silence isn't weakness. It's the weapon. In this video, we'll explore 5 non-negotiable Stoic rules that will teach you to reset your mental state, restart your momentum from a place of clarity, and refocus your life on what actually matters. These principles transformed slaves into teachers, soldiers into philosophers, and ordinary men into legends. They'll transform you too if you have the courage to apply them. Rule 1. Establish radical sovereignty over your inner world. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of history's most influential philosophers, declared in the Enchiridion, "Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing." This is the fundamental principle that separates those who live in perpetual reaction from those who live in deliberate creation. Most people surrender their inner sovereignty every single day. They allow a stranger's comment to ruin their mood. They permit a setback to define their identity. They hand over the keys to their emotional state to circumstances they cannot control. This is spiritual slavery disguised as normal life. Radical sovereignty means you draw a permanent line in the sand. On one side, your thoughts, your judgments, your values, your responses. These you command absolutely. On the other side, outcomes, other people's opinions, external events, the past. These you acknowledge without allowing them to rule you. The problem this solves is the exhausting cycle of emotional hijacking. When you lack sovereignty, you're a puppet dancing to strings you didn't even know existed. Someone criticizes your work, and your entire day collapses. The economy shifts, and your sense of security evaporates. A relationship ends, and you question your worth. You're living in constant reaction, which means you're not living at all. You're being lived by external forces. Here's how you reclaim this power, starting tomorrow morning. First, when you wake up, before you check your phone, Sit in silence for 60 seconds and speak this truth aloud. I control my mind, therefore I control my reality. Second, throughout your day, when external chaos attempts to invade, pause and ask, is this within my power to control? If no, observe it without attachment. If yes, act with precision. Third, end each day by journaling 3 moments where you maintained sovereignty and 3 where you surrendered it. Track the pattern. Awareness creates change. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming the master instead of the slave. Weak people say, they made me angry. Strong people say, I chose my response. Weak people say, life is happening to me. Strong people say, I'm happening to life. You possess a fortress within your skull that no army can breach, no circumstance can penetrate, no person can occupy unless you open the gates. Stop opening the gates. But knowing this isn't enough. There's another principle that builds on this foundation, one that addresses what you do with the sovereignty once you've claimed it. Let's move to Rule 2. Rule 2. Practice the discipline of strategic withdrawal. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 7, verse 28, withdraw into yourself. The rational principle which rules has this nature. It is content with itself when it does what is just, and so secures tranquility. For 2 millennia, this wisdom has been misunderstood as retreat or weakness. It is neither. It is the warrior's most essential discipline. Strategic withdrawal is the deliberate practice of removing yourself from the noise, not permanently, but regularly to reconnect with your core principles, to assess your direction, and to rebuild your mental and spiritual energy. It's creating sacred silence in a world addicted to sound. It's choosing solitude over constant connection. It's valuing depth over breadth. The ancient Stoics knew what modern neuroscience now confirms. Your mind requires periods of disengagement to process, integrate, and strengthen. Constant stimulation creates shallow thinking, reactive behavior, and decision fatigue. You become a leaf blown by every wind instead of the oak that stands through storms. Here's the brutal truth about what happens when you refuse this discipline. Your mind becomes a crowded marketplace where everyone else's agenda gets heard except your own. You lose the ability to think deeply because you're constantly skimming surfaces. Your relationships become transactional because you're never fully present. Your goals become blurry because you haven't given yourself space to define them clearly. You end up living someone else's definition of success while wondering why victory tastes like ash. Implementing strategic withdrawal requires ruthless boundaries and non-negotiable commitments. Here's your action plan. First, establish a daily silence. Practice minimum 20 minutes, where you sit with 0 input. No phone, no music, no reading, just you and your thoughts. This terrifies most people because they've been running from themselves for years. Stop running. Second, create a weekly solitude ritual where you spend 2 to 3 hours completely alone, reviewing your week, assessing your progress, realigning with your values. Use this time to journal, to think, to plan. Third, schedule quarterly retreat days where you completely disconnect from all social systems for 24 hours. No exceptions. This is where deep recalibration happens. The weak mind fears silence because silence reveals truth. The strong mind craves silence because silence forges clarity. When you withdraw strategically, you're not abandoning your responsibilities, you're sharpening yourself to handle them with greater precision. A blade that never leaves the battlefield eventually becomes dull and useless. A blade that's regularly withdrawn, sharpened, and maintained remains deadly. Remember Rule 1 we discussed, sovereignty over your inner world. This amplifies it. You cannot maintain sovereignty in chaos. Strategic withdrawal is how you defend your fortress, reinforce your walls, and plan your campaigns. But there's a third rule that takes this even deeper, one that determines whether your withdrawal actually transforms you or just gives you temporary relief. Let's continue. Rule 3. Destroy the false self through brutal honesty. Seneca wrote in his letters to Lucilius, letter 59, "The worst thing about the person who deceives himself is this: he cannot be deceived by anyone more effectively than he deceives himself." This is the principle that separates genuine transformation from comfortable self-delusion. Most people spend their entire lives constructing and defending a false self, a carefully curated identity built from external validation, inherited expectations, and elaborate lies they've told themselves so often they believe them. This false self is the enemy of your peace. It's the mask you wear that's grown so tight it's suffocating you. It's every should that isn't actually yours, every goal you're chasing because someone else planted it in your mind, every standard you're measuring yourself against that has nothing to do with your authentic values. The Stoics practiced what they called prosophe, relentless self-examination and attention to one's own soul. This wasn't narcissism. It was necessary warfare against self-deception. They understood that you cannot rebuild yourself on a foundation of lies. You cannot reset your life while pretending the current version is working. You cannot refocus when you won't even look clearly at where you're actually aimed. The problem this solves is the silent suffering of living out of alignment with your truth. You feel exhausted, but can't explain why, because the exhaustion comes from pretending. You feel unfulfilled despite apparent success, because you're succeeding at a game you never wanted to play. You feel disconnected from others, because no one actually knows the real you, including yourself. This inner split creates anxiety, depression, and that haunting sense that you're watching your own life from outside, never fully inhabiting it. Destroying the false self requires courage most people will never summon, but you're not most people. Here's how you begin this necessary demolition. First, in your silence, practice from Rule 2. Ask yourself these questions and answer with savage honesty. What am I pretending not to know? What am I doing that violates my actual values? Who am I performing for, and why do I need their approval? Write your answers uncensored. Second, identify 3 major areas where your external life contradicts your internal truth: your career, your relationships, your daily habits, and name the lies you've been telling yourself in each. Third, commit to one act of radical authenticity this week, something that aligns with your true self, even though it might disappoint someone or disrupt your comfortable image. This process is painful because death always precedes rebirth. The false self will fight for survival. It will offer you comfort, safety, predictability. It will tell you that honesty is too risky, too uncomfortable, too selfish. These are the death rattles of your prison guard. Weak people protect their illusions because illusions feel safer than reality. Strong people destroy their illusions because reality, no matter how harsh, is the only foundation strong enough to build an unbreakable life upon. When you stop lying to yourself, you stop needing the world to validate your lies. That's freedom. If you think this is powerful, what comes next will blow your mind, because once you've destroyed the false self, you need to know what to build in its place. Rule 4. Architect your character with deliberate practice. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily in Meditations, Book 5, verse 1. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? This reveals the Stoic secret. Character isn't discovered, it's constructed. Your identity isn't fixed, it's forged through deliberate, repeated action. After you've destroyed the false self in Rule 3, you face a crucial choice. You can drift and allow circumstances to shape you randomly, or you can become the architect of your own character, consciously designing the person you're becoming. The Stoics chose the latter with religious intensity. They treated character development as the highest possible achievement, more valuable than wealth, status, or even survival. Here's what most people miss. Your character is simply the accumulation of your daily behaviors compressed over time. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you're becoming. Every thought you entertain is shaping your mental architecture. Every response you choose is reinforcing a pattern. You are not your past. You are not your circumstances. You are the sum of the choices you're making right now, this moment, and the next. The problem when you neglect this principle is that you become a random collection of reactions instead of a coherent, powerful identity. You say you value courage, but consistently choose comfort. You claim you want discipline, but surrender to every impulse. You talk about integrity, but compromise when it's convenient. This internal inconsistency creates psychological fragmentation. You don't trust yourself because you've proven yourself untrustworthy through your own actions. And if you don't trust yourself, how can you expect to take bold action toward the life you actually want? Becoming the architect of your character requires treating yourself as your most important construction project. Here's the blueprint. First, define your core principles, not what sounds impressive, but what you genuinely want to embody. Write down 5 to 7 non-negotiable character traits. For example, courageous, disciplined, honest, compassionate, resilient, focused, generous. These are your load-bearing walls. Everything you build must support them. Second, establish daily practices that reinforce each principle. If you value courage, do one thing each day that scares you. If you value discipline, honor your commitments to yourself before your commitments to others. If you value honesty, speak truth even when lies are easier. Third, conduct weekly character audits where you review your actions against your principles. Where did you act with integrity? Where did you compromise? What patterns are emerging? This isn't about perfection. The Stoics weren't pursuing flawlessness. They were pursuing consistent alignment between values and actions. Epictetus was clear. We will fail. We will stumble. We will act beneath our ideals. The question is whether you learn and adjust, or whether you make excuses and repeat the pattern. Weak people hope to become better someday. Strong people architect themselves better today, and then tomorrow, and then the next day. Character is the compound interest of daily choices. You cannot control outcomes, but you control every single action that creates your identity. Remember the sovereignty from Rule 1, the strategic withdrawal from Rule 2, the brutal honesty from Rule 3. They all converge here. You now have the space, the clarity, and the foundation to deliberately build something unbreakable. But there's one final rule that protects everything you've built and ensures you don't just reset once, but develop the capacity to refocus whenever life demands it. Rule 5. Embrace voluntary discomfort as your training ground. Seneca wrote in Letters to Lucilius, Letter 18, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?' This is the principle that transforms philosophy from theory into embodied strength. The final rule is perhaps the most counterintuitive but absolutely essential. To become unbreakable, you must regularly break yourself down under controlled conditions. To develop confidence in your resilience, you must test that resilience deliberately. To trust that you can handle difficulty, you must voluntarily embrace difficulty before life forces it upon you. This is what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. Modern life is designed for comfort, convenience, and the elimination of all friction. Every discomfort has a solution you can purchase. Every difficulty has a shortcut you can take. Every challenge has an easier path. This comfort is making you weak, fragile, and terrified. You've lost confidence in your ability to handle hardship because you've deliberately avoided it for so long. When real adversity arrives, and it always does, you shatter because you have no experience bearing weight. Here's what happens when you refuse voluntary discomfort. You develop what psychologists call a fixed comfort zone, a narrowing range of experiences you can tolerate without anxiety. Over time, this zone shrinks. Things that used to be manageable become overwhelming. Your resilience atrophies like unused muscle. You become increasingly dependent on specific conditions to function: the right temperature, the right food, the right schedule, the right emotional environment. You're no longer adaptable. You're brittle. And when life delivers its inevitable disruptions, you break. Implementing this rule means systematically introducing controlled hardship into your comfortable life. Here's your training protocol. First, practice physical discomfort regularly. Take cold showers every morning for at least 2 minutes. The initial shock trains your nervous system to remain calm under stress. Fast 1 day per week, teaching your body and mind that hunger is manageable, not catastrophic. Exercise to the point of genuine fatigue, not just mild exertion. Second, practice social discomfort. Say no to invitations when you're people-pleasing. Speak unpopular truths when everyone else is nodding along. Ask for things you want despite potential rejection. Each act builds emotional resilience. Third, practice material discomfort. Once per month, live as simply as possible for 24 hours. Sleep on the floor, eat basic meals, wear your oldest clothes. Seneca did this regularly to remind himself that poverty, should it come, would be survivable. The psychological shift this creates is profound. When you voluntarily embrace what others avoid, you prove to yourself, not with affirmations or visualization, but with direct experience, that you are capable. You're not afraid of cold because you regularly choose it. You're not afraid of hunger because you've made friends with it. You're not afraid of rejection because you've practiced it. Fear loses its power when you've already survived what you feared. Weak people avoid all discomfort and wonder why they feel so fragile. Strong people seek discomfort strategically and develop genuine confidence in their capacity to endure. This is how warriors were trained. This is how philosophers strengthened themselves. This is how you become someone who doesn't break when pressure comes. Think back to everything we've covered. Sovereignty over your inner world, from Rule 1. Strategic withdrawal to maintain clarity, from Rule 2. Brutal honesty to destroy false identity, from Rule 3. Deliberate character construction, from Rule 4. And now, voluntary discomfort to forge unbreakable resilience. These aren't separate practices. They're a unified system for completely resetting, restarting, and refocusing your life in silence, away from the noise that's been drowning you. These aren't just philosophical ideas to contemplate while you scroll through your comfortable existence. They're operational commands for rebuilding yourself from the foundation up. They're the blueprint for transformation that emperors used while ruling empires, that slaves used while earning freedom, that soldiers used while facing death. The Stoics understood something most modern people have forgotten. External circumstances will always be chaotic, unpredictable, and beyond your complete control. The only variable you truly command is yourself, your responses, your character, your inner state. Master that, and you become unbreakable, regardless of what storms rage around you. This transformation doesn't happen through passive consumption. You've watched this video, you've received the knowledge. Now comes the only question that matters. Will you apply it? Tomorrow morning, will you establish sovereignty, or will you hand your peace to the first person who annoys you? This week, will you create space for strategic withdrawal, or will you continue drowning in noise? Today, will you face one uncomfortable truth about yourself, or will you continue the comfortable deception? In your next decision, will you choose the action that builds your character or the one that erodes it? Right now, will you embrace one form of voluntary discomfort, or will you reach for the easy path again? The answers to these questions will determine whether you remain the person you've been, or whether you become the unbreakable force you're capable of being. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift while watching, tap that like button right now, not for the algorithm, but as a commitment to yourself that you're choosing the harder path. Drop a comment below with your answer to this question. Which of these 5 rules challenges you most, and what's the first action you'll take to implement it? I read these. Your public commitment creates accountability. And if you want more unapologetic Stoic truth delivered every single week, no fluff, no motivation without method, just ancient wisdom forged into modern weapons, hit that subscribe button. This channel exists for people who refuse mediocrity and demand more from themselves. The noise of the world will always be there, trying to distract you, diminish you, and drain you. But you now have the tools to build a fortress of silence within yourself, where clarity lives, where strength grows, and where you can reset, restart, and refocus as many times as necessary. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're not beyond transformation. You're exactly where every great journey begins, at the moment of decision. Become the master of your mind. Rebuild from the foundation. Refocus on what truly matters. Rise unbreakable. The work begins now.